So a guidance counselor who wants drag to be normalized in front of kids is in trouble for possibly assaulting a kid.
Good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us. I'm Sean Mooney. Tucson police have arrested a Tucson high school counselor accused of having an inappropriate relationship with a 15-year-old student. News for Tucson's Priscilla Casper joins us live in studio with the latest. Priscilla.
Zobella Brazil Vinick is charged with one count of sexual conduct with a minor. Now, detectives say the investigation began earlier this month. According to the interim complaint, the student had allegedly been living with Vinick and another woman. Detectives conducted interviews and served multiple search warrants in connection with the case. They say those warrants revealed inappropriate messages between Vinick and the student. Tucson Unified School District releasing a statement today reading in part, quote, on Thursday, May 5th, 2022, Ms. Vinick resigned her position from the Tucson Unified School District and is no longer an employee of the district. The Tucson Unified School District administration will continue to cooperate with the Tucson Police Department in its ongoing investigation. Goes on to say our administration will continue to emphasize the health and safety of our students as our highest priority, unquote. Meanwhile, Tucson police are continuing their investigation and ask anyone with information about this case to call 911 or 88 Crime.
There's a reason why these parents keep showing up to these town hall meetings, and it's because there are people out there trying to advocate for pedophilia. An abstract from Stephen Kirschner of Fredonia State University. Non-forcible adult child sex is thought to be morally wrong in part because it's non-consensual. In this paper, I argue against this notion. In particular, I reject accounts of the moral wrongfulness of adult child sex that rest on the absence of consent, concerns about adult exploitation of children, and the existence of morally primitive duty against such.
Children can't be willing things in general. It's an odd view in that they seem to will things all the time. They will participation in kickball. They will showing up, participating in the bar mitzvah lessons, bat mitzvah lessons. So there's all sorts of things that they will. You might think, well, maybe there's something distinct about sex that they can't really understand it. It's not clear to me that what they're not getting at is consent. I suspect what they want to say is, okay, they're willing participants, they're voluntary participants. They have some understanding what's going on, not understanding we do, but some understanding, but they haven't consented. But perhaps that's so, but that's a different claim from their being unwilling. There's just lots of activities that children engage in that they don't understand all that well. For example, when you first show up to participate in a judo tournament or you prepare for your bat mitzvah, I mean, you have a rough idea, but it's not clear how much you fully understand it. Imagine that an adult male wants to have a 12-year-old girl. Imagine that she's a willing participant. A very standard, very widely held view that there's something deeply wrong about this, and it's wrong independent of it being criminalized. It's not obvious to me that is in fact wrong. I think this is a mistake, and I think that exploring why it's a mistake will tell us not only things about adult child, but also about fundamental principles of morality. If we're in the area of legislation rather than morality, here's a rule of thumb. If you don't know whether something has expected good or expected bad consequences, the thumb on the scale should go to liberty. So if we don't know whether willing with 15-year-olds is going to have net good or bad consequences, it's not like we say, oh, well, go ahead and ban it. The idea is that people trying to criminalize something bear the burden. And even having harsh opinions on this, before we condemn people for engaging these on the basis of probabilistic utilitarianism, we should know that it does pose a risk for those and only those willing participants. I don't think we know that.
Still the adult child, that's always a big seller.
Oh, yeah. Well,
I had good friends who said, are you crazy? Do not write that book.
Man, listen, you're talking to a guy who for 25 years has been making arguments more or less in defense of adult child in classrooms. And I don't know if it's the same argument as yours, but I even authored a piece in the Daily Beast in which I called into question the age of consent laws, which is, and I brought to bear the arguments I was making in class. And I'm going to see how they
infringement case that we don't get, they can't give their valid consent, and therefore it's wrong in virtue of being a right infringement. And there's a view that it's exploitative. That even if it's not harmful, and even if it's not a right infringement, it's somehow an exploitation.
Right. I've heard all these. Yes. Okay.
Right. So those are the three dominant arguments. And none of these convince me. So the
Me neither.
The harm argument, well, there's actual, empirical controversy over this.
Sure, yeah.
On the rights-based argument, I think, look, we make children do all sorts of things that we don't want to do.
Thank you.
We make them go to church. We make them go to the temple. We tell them to go to school. They got to go to the dentist. They got to go to their sister's ballet recital. And we don't care what they say. And they want to do things. We say no, right? They say, I want to stay up and watch, Creature Feature on WPIX until, 2 in the morning. We say, well, it's tough.
That is all a child's life is coercion.
Right, that's right.
Is coercion by adults and often to make the child do something for the adult's pleasure only.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
You say, you're going to go to your great uncle's funeral, even though you want to go, and even though it's not in your interest.
Right.
So the rights-based argument's a little bit hard to follow.
People trying to advocate for grown adults being attracted to little kids sexually.
Previously on that bullshit.
Much for that question. I use the term minor attracted person or MAP in the title and throughout the book for multiple reasons. First of all, because I think it's important to use terminology for groups that members of that group want others to use for them. And MAP advocacy groups like Before You Act have advocated for use of the term MAP. They've advocated for it primarily because it's less stigmatizing than other terms like a lot of people, when they hear the term, automatically assume that it means a sex offender, and that isn't true, and it leads to a lot of misconceptions about attractions toward minors. I've definitely heard the idea that you brought up, though, that the use of the term minor attracted person suggests that it's okay to be attracted to children. But using a term that communicates who someone is attracted to doesn't indicate anything about the morality of that attraction.
People who do these things and then they're working in schools as teachers or guidance counselors, and then they're going to tell these kids to not go home and tell their parents about what they're learning. Do you understand why a parent would be concerned about what's going on in these schools and how much these schools don't want to tell these parents about that? How these schools try to cut these parents off when they're talking about that? If you're being met with these types of questions, you know what the honest and reasonable thing is to do? Answer them, explain what's going on, say in detail what's being taught, and maybe a parent will understand, maybe they won't, maybe they'll take their kid out of that school, who knows, but at least you'll have more respect if you answer the question clear, cut, and concise. But a lot of people not doing that, and it's creating this big problem where people are not trusting schools, and that's sad, because if you want to be educated, if you want to have your kid be a smart person, you would want to send them to a school where you know they're going to get the best education and not get a bunch of rigmarole from a bunch of people who have low self-esteem. It is sad that we have examples of this and people try to sweep it under the rug as not something that's happening enough for us to care about. It's a problem, and if you don't want to address it, fine. Keep your mouth shut, stand to the side, and let these parents ask the questions necessary to figure out what the fuck is going on with their children. Because I don't care how many of you want to say, oh, those kids belong to the community should raise them. They are in a family, and that family is going to help that person grow. If you don't like that, start your own family. Don't control everybody else. And for anybody that's going to try to argue to me that a minor attracted pedophile is something that should be normalized in the LGBTQ community or in human society, I have 2 words for you. Fuck you.